time to relax.
Have a beverage.
Yes, yes, lubricate, resonate, advocate, all those things. We're going to do all the things.
All the things, except that one thing that all you people with dirty minds are thinking right now that rhymes with all the words Michael just said.
Oh, wow. Snap. Okay. Wasn't even going to go there, but I'm glad I didn't continue that line either because I
I
might have
know.
ended
I thought
up
it was going to
there.
come naturally. It's got da 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 da, and I was
No,
like, "Where's he going?"
I would have prevented
Pulled
that for
back.
sure.
Good
Yeah,
man.
would have pulled that punch for sure. But I can always count on you to pick up anything that I leave hanging. So
There you
good
go.
times. All right, let's get into this nonsense.
All right.
This time we have a little bit of a theme for Off the Clock. We're going to be talking exclusively about movies. And I'm going to kick things off because I went on a little adventure on the ye old streaming services recently where I was feeling that sci-fi vibe, right? I'm like, I want to watch some sci-fi movies. And I don't care if it's new, I don't care if it's old, I don't care if it's big budget, low budget, whatever. Just show me streaming services, some sci-fi movies that I have not seen so I can decide whether or not I'm into them. And I saw things. I saw things that I cannot unsee, which I probably will not talk about here. I saw many duds, many things that I was not particularly enthusiastic or enamored by. However, I did end up, as part of that adventure, seeing two movies that I do want to talk about, at least briefly, that kind of have a similar theme. And I'm going to start kind of dark. I'm gonna start like on the horror sci-fi end of the spectrum here with something that I was vaguely just a little tiny itty bitty bit familiar with, just being a kind of hardcore science fiction reader for a long time, which is this film called Aniara. It's Aniara, and it is based on an epic science fiction poem that was written back in the 1950s by a Swedish author named Harry Martinson. And don't feel bad if you're if you're not familiar with this or don't already know about it. It's very obscure, but it has been translated a few times into English over the years, and is actually kind of quoted and as being responsible or like the inspiration for some more modern books that are kind of famous in the science fiction world. Things like Tau Zero and A Fire Upon the Deep. So, like, if you're a big science fiction head, if you're a big science fiction nerd like me, you may have had some vague awareness of this poem or at least the things that were inspired by it. But as I say, this movie of the same name as the poem is directly translated from it. So it's a Swedish film from 2018, obviously subtitled is how I experienced it. That basically like very faithfully recreates the story of the poem, which is basically about a colony ship that's fleeing a dying Earth for hopefully a new life on Mars that experiences a catastrophe where it gets knocked off course and sent out of the solar system. So it misses Mars completely and has no way to turn around or go back. And so these people are basically just set adrift in this colony ship forever. Right. And it's like, what happens to them? Like, do they survive? Are they able to survive? What comes about as a result of this happening? And as I alluded to previously, the poem is sort of infamous for being one of the most like dark, bleak kind of examples of science fiction horror, right? It's like that real existential, like just dread kind of science fiction that you see sometimes, that I would argue is some of the most horrifying of horror. And the movie is very faithful to the source material, and that is all I will say about that. But I really enjoyed it for what it is. I thought it was very cool that they were as faithful to the source material as they were, and went to all the places that the original poem goes to, and in a very unflinching, very like uh, just real super legit way that I thought was very cool, and kind of reminds you of like when films get made that are outside the Hollywood system and aren't like beholden to like the tropes and standards and practices of like typical Hollywood films. You get to see some things that you would not get to see in a Hollywood film, right? From something like this. So if you like your science fiction really dark and bleak and kind of fatalistic, uh, Aniara, maybe check that out. But to flip that coin a little bit, I did see another movie, science fiction movie about space colonization that has a much more optimistic kind of tone to it, and is a bit more of a fun kind of uh, traditional science fiction piece called Passengers, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it was a pretty big film in 2018 as well. Or that might have been 2016, somewhere around that ballpark. But it had Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence in it. So a pretty big Hollywood, attempt at a sci-fi blockbuster, which I don't know how well that film actually did when it was in theaters. But I actually enjoyed that one quite a bit too. And it's definitely on like the less uh the less like dramatic side of things, a little more approachable, a little more accessible, but also still kind of cool and still kind of challenging in certain ways. But if you're looking for something science fiction-y that deals with space travel and colonization and stuff like that, but has more of kind of accessible, approachable kind of vibe to it, maybe check Passengers out as well. But those were my two big finds from my science fiction adventure. I probably watched about a dozen films to completion on the various streaming services, trying to find something that I was into, and those were kind of the two highlights for me, which ironically just happened to both be about colony ships. So weird how that worked out.
Next, you'll be watching reruns of Space 1999.
I've been seeing that popping up all over the place lately. I don't know what's up with that. I don't know if it just came out on a streaming service or something, but I see people talking about that everywhere lately.
Yeah, I think it was Canadian because they
Yeah.
show used to be on up here all the
Mhm.
time, and I think
I
the
actually used to have a vinyl record when I was a kid that was basically just an audio dump of the pilot episode of Space 1999, and the second episode, I believe, as well, was like the B side of the LP
uh,
back in the day. So I'm very familiar with those two episodes anyway. I probably heard them about 1,000 times when I was a kid.
I always mean to watch it because I can't really remember it too much, other than I think the ship gets knocked off course and they're trying to figure what to
Well,
do
it's
to
like the whole
survive and where they're
moon,
going to go.
right? Because they were like storing nuclear waste or something on the moon, and there was a explosion. And it like knocked the moon out of orbit, I believe, is the premise of that show.
I thought they were
And
in a spaceship.
well, they had a spaceship. They had the Eagle, right? Was their little spaceship that they flew around in. But I think literally, I might be wrong about this. Tell me, internet. But I think the premise of Space 1999 is literally like the moon gets knocked out of its orbit, and they're like literally flying away from the sun on the moon.
Could be. I'll have to take a look. I know I actually have it on my watch list, but I
Yeah.
just never get around to
Well, and this
watching
is
it.
another thing. I don't know if there's maybe been different adaptations of it. Like I don't know if that's like I don't know if that originated from a book or vice versa, or maybe there's been books written based off of the show or whatever. But
Um,
I have some recollection of that being the case. We'll see.
Well, it's out now on streaming, and
Yeah.
there's only one Space 1999.
Hmm.
Almost positive. So
Yeah,
I'm sure
well,
it's
and it's funny. It's always funny, right, when you see things like that in like 2001 and 2010 and stuff like that now. And it's like, oh yeah, we're like way past that.
Yeah,
That's like that one Octavia Butler book is blowing up right now because it's set in 2024. And of course, we're in
yeah,
2024 now. So like all sorts of people are picking up that book, which is actually written back in the 90s.
uh,
But because the people are talking about how much of that book, successfully or unsuccessfully predicted 2024. That's kind of like a buzzy thing that's happening online right now. Um,
int-
but yeah, so you kind of went down a completely different rabbit hole with your movie watching. You want to tell everybody about that?
yep. I decided to go far from space,
Hmm.
back to the old west, back to I think it was like the 1870s or something. So
Hmm.
I watched The Hateful Eight, a
Mm.
Tarantino film.
Was that a rewatch for you, or is that your first time?
It was a rewatch, but it had been a while. And
I have yet to see it myself. So yeah,
really,
yeah.
yeah,
There's a
it
few Tarantino films I've yet to get around to, not because I'm not interested, but I just haven't gotten around to them yet, and that happens to be one of them.
yeah, it's a good one. I'd seen it, but that's the beauty of having an absolutely horrendous memory
Yeah, nice.
is I just it's like seeing a new movie all over again. Of course, certain things will pop up and go, oh, I do remember this, I do remember that, but I didn't even remember the ending.
Hmm.
I mean, I vaguely knew, but
Hmm.
it's basically about this. He's like a bounty hunter, and he has this woman captive who's like this notorious bad person out west, and they're on a stagecoach, and it's your usual sort of big western with the big skies, the mountains, a lot of really beautiful landscape, and
Hmm.
it's the stagecoach drivers like hustling the horses because you can tell there's like a storm coming, and
Hmm.
they're going along, and then they're stopped by another bounty hunter who's got three dead bodies sitting in the snow. And the first bounty hunter is played by Kurt Russell.
Hmm.
Second bounty hunter is played by Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, yeah, nice.
And of course, Samuel L. Jackson wants to get into the stagecoach, but Kurt Russell has paid specifically to have a private coach because he has his prisoner handcuffed to him, and it's like a $10,000 reward.
Hmm.
And his nickname is the Hangman because unlike Samuel Jackson's character, who just shoots
Right.
his wanted victim in the back or wherever he finds them,
Hmm.
every single one of Russell's characters makes it to the
Yeah, he
Hangman.
brings him in alive. Yeah.
Yeah, and but after some discussion, he allows. Uh, well, they get the dead bodies up on the roof, and then Samuel Jackson gets in, and they're off to this town of Red Rock, where this the sheriff's going to pay Russell the bounty.
Hmm.
But they bump into a third guy who's out in snow. Um, and it ends up that that guy is actually the new sheriff of the town. And the old sheriff, I guess, was killed. And of course, Kurt Russell doesn't believe anything anyone says. All he cares about is he wants to get this woman to
Hmm.
Red Rock.
Yeah.
But once again, after some discussion, he lets him into the stagecoach. And then there's the usual Tarantino conversation back and
Hmm.
forth between there's four players now, all sort of gabbing away in their own sort of character like manners.
Sure.
And
As one would expect.
exactly.
Yeah.
And there's one side, some of them were on the Union side, some were on the Confederate side inside the stagecoach. So there's that kind of drama going on
Tension.
too.
Yeah.
So then they make it, they're not going to make it to Red Rock to the Storm. So they're going to stop at this inn. They call it a haberdashery, but they stop at this inn and they're going to ride out the storm there.
Uh,
And then it becomes kind of like an Agatha Christie novel where there's already a group of people that also are trying to beat the storm that are already at this haberdashery.
right.
And so the two groups kind of collide, and each player or each character has, some kind of story behind them. And you
Mhm.
wonder who's what, who's who. Is someone actually here to help get this woman to escape? Or are they all just by happenstance there?
Mhm.
And things just kind of ratchet up as a Tarantino movie tends to do. And
Sure.
I won't say any
Yeah, I
more,
think we're at the point where you probably don't want to say too much more. Yeah,
especially since you said that you didn't see it. So I don't want to
yeah.
ruin it
I
for
mean,
you.
I knew pretty much everything you said. I was familiar with that
Yeah.
much. Yeah, I know the setup. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's lots of, it's the usual, interesting banter
Mhm.
that Tarantino's known for. And yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
So I actually do know one really interesting, I think it's interesting anyway, trivia thing about that movie. And I'm sure you'll recognize this bit when I describe it. It's not, I don't think very integral to the plot, so I don't think it's a spoiler or anything. But basically there's a kind of famous scene in that movie where I guess the woman that Kurt Russell's character is taking to the town is playing a guitar, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
picks it up and smashes it,
Yeah.
right? So apparently, the story behind that is that was one of the original Martin guitars, right? Like the original, right? Like from like
Yeah.
the very one of the very first Martin guitars ever made, which they had gotten from Martin to use as a prop in the film for that scene. It's like a multi-million dollar guitar, right? Which Kurt Russell thought was a prop, and he does what he does to it, not knowing that it was the actual guitar.
Yeah.
They basically just destroyed like a multi-million dollar guitar in that scene.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard actually that um because I thought it was from like a museum piece that they got from, but anyways, whoever was that never lent. That movie was the reason that they never
Yeah, they
lent
never lend their
anything
guitars out
again.
anymore to anything again because
Yeah.
of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the trivia bit. Yeah. So when you see that, and she knew, right? She knew it was the actual guitar. So when you see her reaction to it, that's her legit reaction, right? Like knowing what
Yeah.
he did, not knowing what he was doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the fun like trivia bits about that movie.
Yeah. So, so yeah, so it was a bit of fun.
Yeah, nice. So you
I like
enjoyed it
westerns.
again the second time?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find I've been enjoying rewatches better than I have some of the duds that I've watched that are brand new.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about when you watch new things, you're always taking a chance, right? When
Yeah.
you rewatch something that you already liked, it's pretty rare that I go back and watch something that I liked and I'm like, oh man, this doesn't do it for me anymore. I mean, it
Yeah.
happens, but it's, not common.
Yeah.
But yeah, a rewatch is usually like kind of comfort food, right?
Yeah.
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 But if you never try the new stuff, then you don't find, your new favorite or whatever. So it's
Exactly.
like a catch 22 there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they come along.
Yeah. I'm always super psyched when I find something new that I end up enjoying, but I also very much enjoy revisiting the classics. So I
Yeah.
think there's room for both for sure.
Well, the two science fiction ones you mentioned sound, although I think I've seen Passengers.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it, but I
Mhm.
definitely have not seen the other one.
Aniara. Yeah.
And I was going to try to pronounce it because I knew I was going to butcher it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That one I think you might enjoy. If you don't mind subtitles,
yeah.
if that's not off-putting to you, I think there's a lot of interesting things in that film for sure.
Interesting.
But speaking of interesting, you will be interested, I'm sure, to see our next episode of the Postmortem Report, which will be the next thing appearing on your feed. But we're going to get up on out of here for now and give you time to experience all the wonderful things that we just told you about if you haven't already. Any parting words or final thoughts you'd like to deliver before we beam up and out of here?
Nope.